If you haven't noticed, our great friend and neighbor, the United States, is going through a massive rebuild. And sadly, our relationship between Canada and the United States is, well, on the rock. So is it time then to have a heart to heart conversation about what's going on with each other and how we maybe can work together here?
A clear path forward requires looking back and learning. Good public policy requires human connection. It's a consideration of the facts, applying common sense, and innovation. It's urban, it's rural, it's real life. We all have something to contribute. We all have a responsibility to get informed because there's a little piece of Canada in all of us, isn't there? Let's learn on this path together. This is Leaders on the Frontier.
So, with me here today to have a heart to heart discussion about the Canada-U.S. relationship is none other than Jim Lakely, our friend and vice president at the Heartland Institute. He's a journalist, he's covered the White House, and he certainly follows these things very closely, and he's a good friend of Canada. So, a warm welcome, Jim.
Very glad to be with you again, David, and you and your listeners.
Well, Jim, it's great to have you back because I know we've had a lot of interesting conversations about not only public policy, but of course, the relationship between Canada and the United States. So I know that this is going to be a challenging conversation today, but it's amazing. And I know you've watched this, but there's a lot of Canadians that are pretty offended by, tweets and missives about Canada becoming the 51st state. And frankly, kind of offended that, man, I thought we were friends, Jim. And now your president is talking about a 25% tariff on March the 9th. So we're going to dare to take the deep dive and have a heart to heart about our relationship, Jim. So are you up to this task?
Well, I think we are, as I am personally, and we are as a country. We did, after all, allow you to win that hockey game the other day. So we are trying to mend fences.
Okay, I wasn't going to bring that up because I know we booed your national anthem, so I want to half apologize for all my rude Canadians who dared to boo your national anthem. But you know what? They returned the favor in Boston, as I recall. So maybe it's a tit for tat thing going on here. But did that surprise you that during a hockey game there'd be kind of this immature booing of national anthems? The last time I checked, it was a hockey game. It wasn't like a war, was it?
No, I mean, I'm not going to understand how it happened. And I think, look, it's a sporting event. It's all in good fun. I'm certainly, the people of the United States have great affection for our friends to our north. And I know that the feeling is mutual among our Canadian friends, and I have many of them about the United States. I think I guess I'm enjoying it more than you guys are north of the border when President Trump jokes about Governor Trudeau and the 51st state and being Canada, and by the way, we wouldn't take all of the provinces. I think, Saskatchewan, I would like, just because I like to say it. It's a fun word. Alberta would also be on my list since you've got lots of natural resources there. The rest of them are would be under negotiation at some point. But, look, I would understand it if I was, I'm not a Canadian citizen. If I was a Canadian citizen and my much bigger and more powerful and wealthier, sibling was constantly ribbing me, I would have a bit of a complex about it as well. But look, I think people can just kind of relax and learn. I think we're going to learn in Trump 2.0 the proper way to interpret what Donald Trump says. And the way he says it, and it's important to actually pay attention to what he does, but at the base and at the beginning of everything, when you're interpreting what Donald Trump is saying, you have to think of it as a negotiating tactic. Everything that he does is a negotiation. Everything that he does is a negotiation. He negotiates with his own family. Certainly, I'm sure he even negotiates with his own grandchildren on how much ice cream they may get after dinner. So, if you look at it that way, it's a little easier to understand what he's trying to do. And what he's trying to do is make a good deal for everyone. And that includes, what's going on right now between Canada and the United States.
Okay, well, therein lies perhaps the silver lining because, a lot of Canadians feel like this is like a threatening, challenging time for a country. And in some ways it is, although we'll get to that in a moment. But anyways, we're going to have this bilateral therapeutic summit discussion here, whatever you want to call it. And speaking of therapist. It reminds me of a famous quote by Carl Jung, the great psychologist, who said, "Thinking is difficult, and that is why most people judge." Do you believe that, Jim? That sometimes we simplify things and just because we want to judge and we don't want to think?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, let's think about, like I said, all the things that Donald Trump has been saying. And right before we went live on the air here, David, you had mentioned, or I think you mentioned here in the beginning, the tariff threat for the United States, against Canada, the importation of goods. Now, does Donald Trump really want high tariffs between these two very close countries in Canada and the United States? No, he wants free trade. I mean, he does want tariffs, but he wants fair
Hmm.
ones that makes sense for both sides. I mean, what's been interesting about the tariff debate, and it's kind of died down here in the United States, there is so much happening so fast in Washington D.C. in the reforms, from D.O.G.E to everything else that the Trump administration is putting forth right now. He's got most of his cabinet in place, and they are going at breakneck speed, changing the way things have been operating in Washington D.C. for literally decades. And so it's kind of, the tariff talk, which was pretty hot a few weeks ago, has really, really cooled down, at least on this side of the border. Um, so he talks about having a department of external revenue instead of internal revenue and all of that. But, the talk here in the United States is people were criticizing here in America. We're criticizing Trump for his reckless and dangerous and insulting tariffs that he was going to impose or threatened to impose on Canada and Mexico. People act like there was 100% free trade and there were no tariffs on any goods going, across the
Mm.
border
Yeah.
at any time with any products, and that's just not true. I mean,
Hmm.
it's an unfortunate fact of life that you Canadians are not able to enjoy the wonders of Wisconsin cheese without paying a 250%
Oh,
tariff
come
on it.
on.
And so there are tariffs that are on individual products all over our economy going back and
Hmm.
forth. And so, this idea that there's been this wonderful free trade, it's as if, you were trading between Minnesota and Wisconsin, the same thing as between the United States and Canada. That's not been the case. I mean, tariffs are a fact of life. They're imposed by your country, they're imposed by my country, and they're imposed for certain different reasons. And again, what Donald Trump was doing when he threatened a 25% tariff on everything that comes south of the border into the United States was he wanted Canada to get as serious about border control as the United States was going to be. He basically is using the strength of the United States economy to, I'll say it, bully Canada into implementing his border policy essentially in your
Okay.
country.
So,
Now
so,
you can
so
you can
why
either
is
choose
he
to do it or
doing
not.
that to us? Why is he doing that to Jim? I thought we were friends. Like when we think of border security,
Mhm.
I think most Canadians think, well, we've got a pretty secure border, but perhaps we don't. I mean, I know that there's been a lot of information. I know that the world's largest fentanyl lab was busted just a few weeks ago in Kelowna, BC, and there's lots of other things that are being found out. I know that some of our premiers have said that we only inspect, what is it, less than 1% of the millions of containers that come in through our ports. And there's all the criminal gangs are here, including, what are they again? Oh, yeah, the Mexican cartel. So
Mhm.
you, as Americans, in the new Trump administration, you guys see that. Is that what you're saying? And then we need to clean up our act.
Yeah, I mean, because there's, it's they call it it's the largest, and it is, right? It's the largest unprotected border in the world. We don't have our militaries. It's not like the DMZ between North Korea and South Korea.
Yeah.
It is just it's basically in a lot of ways an arbitrary line along whatever parallel that is across North America.
49th parallel.
49th
Don't you
parallel. There you
forget it,
go.
Jim.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
there it
Yeah.
is.
So, but the idea is that look, the border immigration and border security were a big factor in Donald Trump being elected president of the United States. The Americans in general, and actually an overwhelming majority of them, if you listen, if you read polls, want our borders secured. They basically want to
Mm,
stop everything crossing the border for a little bit, at least, until we can get a handle on what the hell's going on. And mostly the problem is on our southern border with Mexico, but it is not
mhm.
absolutely clean, so to speak, on the northern border as well. And again, Donald
Okay.
Trump does not want to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian goods. He wants Canada to get as serious about the flow of fentanyl and illegal immigrants coming across the northern border and terrorists. I mean, it's not as if it's a huge flow, but it's not
Hmm.
zero, and we need zero. Donald Trump has a zero tolerance policy for illegal entry into the United States. And if he's going to treat Mexico firmly, he's also going to treat Canada firmly. Really, that's only fair. And
Hmm.
frankly, there were people that were saying, oh, big deal. All Trump did was get Canada to do what it said it was going to do. And I would reply, exactly right. Canada says they're
Ah.
going to secure the border. Canada says they're going to start making arrests and inspecting, as you said, shipping containers to make sure that smuggling of illegal drugs and people is not happening
Hmm.
on our northern
Hmm.
side of the border. So instead of talking about it, it's actually being done. And one of the great things, again, it's a negotiation. Donald Trump is a businessman. And what did he say? He said, okay, we're going to suspend my planned I'm sorry. Yes, suspend the planned tariff for 30 days. We'll see how it's going. And so
Hmm.
this is a president and an administration that is going to require results. That talking is fine. Talking is how diplomacy is done. But
Hmm.
unless
Hmm.
action follows the talking, there will be consequences.
Okay, so this is frankly an administration that's not into talk; it's ultimately into action. And so this is kind of a new day, isn't it? And it's not like he didn't warn us about it. So help us understand again the basics. Like remember, we're speaking to a Canadian audience here, Jim. The Make America Great movement or MAGA, what is that really all about? Like I know that in the polls in November when Donald Trump had that stunning victory in all houses of the Congress, he got the White House, the electoral college, even the popular vote. He ran on the economy, like rebuilding the middle class. He wanted to stop open, unsecure borders. And he was against this cultural wokeism, this crazy stuff
Yeah.
where you've got more than two genders. Um, does that just about summarize it? So help us understand what MAGA is all about.
That's part of it. I'm 54 years old, so I was born in 1970, so I was a child in the 70s, but kind of came of age in the 1980s. And the 1980s are, especially for Gen X, my generation, quite glamorized. We look back on the 80s with great affection. And when was Donald Trump's heyday? That was also the 1980s before he became a reality TV star. And so
Hmm.
a lot of times when I hear "Make America Great Again," I made the analogy. I think I made a meme of this on X that Kamala Harris's slogan near the end of her campaign was "We're not going back," and I would respond, "We actually are going back in a DeLorean at
Mm.
88 miles an hour. We are going back
Wow.
to the we're going back to the 80s in our mindset. In other words, we're going to make that we're going to go back to the future in that regard. And so, um, make America great again means, as you mentioned there, David, going back to a world that made sense to ordinary Americans, and I know a world that makes sense to ordinary Canadians as well. And that
Hmm.
is that we have two
Hmm.
genders, that a drag queen story hour in your local library doesn't make
Hmm.
any sense. That having children being able to socially transition to a different gender in school and have the schools not
Hmm.
be able to tell the parents about it, all of these sorts of crazy leftist ideology, the kind of crazy leftist ideology that was once confined to the most radical of the college campuses in this country and in Canada. And instead,
Hmm.
those radical ideas became official government policy. And that ordinary people, were being socially and in some cases professionally punished for resisting that and just trying to live lives like ordinary people.
Hmm.
And then Make America Great Again also means let's bring manufacturing back to the United States and frankly back to North America. I'm fine with a car that is made in Canada that is I'm comfortable in and I want to drive, or any kind of products like that.
Hmm.
Our two best
Hmm.
friends in the world are Canada and Mexico. That's where most of our trade is done. Their security and our security, in other words, there's Canada's, Mexico's, and the United States security is tied in together. One of the reasons Mexico is a problem is because it is insecure and run by drug cartels. And so we want to work with Mexico to crush those cartels so that less fentanyl gets across the border. The fentanyl, of course, comes from China. So, making America great again means making our manufacturing better again. And so we don't,
Hmm.
most of our silicon chips are not made in the United States. I don't think maybe any of them are, and I don't think they're made in Canada either. China is taking over almost all manufacturing. I saw something today, and I was actually trying to fact check it, but I saw that China has more manufacturing than the United States, Japan, and Germany combined, or something like that. And if that's not exactly accurate, it's probably close enough for this discussion. And so, making America great again would be bringing more manufacturing here in the United States for national security reasons, but also for job creation reasons. And, we have runaway inflation, we have monetary policy in which we just print our way out of any spending problem, which actually just creates more spending problems. And that's why the D.O.G.E movement with Elon Musk in Washington, D.C. is so exciting for a small government libertarian like myself, because for the first time in my entire life, the government is actually going to be smaller than it was a year ago, because they are laying people off. They are shutting down entire departments. The whole USAID scam has been exposed by D.O.G.E. and is being shut down.
Okay.
And so this is all to the great. That's how you make America great again. You stop spending money on stuff that doesn't matter to the American people, but only matters to a small elite. You bring manufacturing and back into the United States, and you stop the culture war that the left has waged against ordinary people and made their lives and their children miserable.
Okay, so that's the big summary, I think, Jim, that you're getting at. That as a Canadian, it's maybe hard for me to totally appreciate, is that this is a big, I don't want to use the word reset because it's so loaded with Klaus Schwab and company, but it's truly a rebuilding of the United States focused on peace, prosperity, to rebuild the middle class. And they are going to move, they're moving hundreds of executive orders out of the White House to really reset the United States so it's on a pathway of prosperity and peace. They don't want to be in endless wars. Like, what's the point of sending people to Iraq for 10 years? And it seems like Americans resonate with that. In fact, you even had traditional groups that vote Democrat vote for Donald Trump, and that includes Black Americans, Hispanics. I mean, this is the real story, is it not, Jim, in terms of what happened during those November elections? That's his mandate. Is that right?
It is. I mean, again, make America great again is probably the greatest political slogan since, a chicken in every pot, maybe. I don't know. And that was almost 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But it resonates across racial demographics, gender demographics, or I should say it appeals to both men and women, to young and old, to people who remember a nation that felt like it was on top, or at least on the rise. And for, I think, really since, maybe Barack Obama's presidency, when the glow of electing the first Black president wore off, people looked around and saw that a lot of radical stuff was going on, and that they kind of regretted going down this road that we have now gone, turned around from. I think it's good to think of this as a restoration. Victor Davis Hanson was on a podcast the other day, on his own podcast, I believe. And I listened to it the other day, and he says, this is the counter-revolution, that since the 1960s, we've had the revolution, and, there's lots of Marxists that are in charge of government departments and universities and newsrooms, and all of the influential places in our culture and government are controlled by the hard left in the United States. And this is the restoration of America that people thought they lived in, and thought that that's where they grew up, and thought that's the America they were fighting for. And so this is a counter-revolution to the, until now, has been a successful revolution by the radical left in the United States since the 1960s.
Okay, so we're in this heart-to-heart discussion, Jim. So I'm going to address the elephant in the room. For a lot of Canadians, I'm going to bring it up, is the orange man bad syndrome. The whole idea that Donald Trump, he's a bad man. He's like Hitler. We've heard all the legacy media in Canada. We hear it from the CBC all the time, that he's a convicted criminal, that he is a Russian stooge that, well, he is just really a bad man. And it's almost like a lot of Canadians have a visceral emotional reaction to your president. I'm sorry to say this, Jim, but I'm being honest in this heart to heart conversation. And so how do you address that? I mean, because like how would Americans, I guess everybody in Canada is asking, how would Americans vote then for this bad man? Or is it all true? Or is it not true?
Well, it's not true. I mean, he's not a bad man. If you see him interact with people, in fact, before he decided to change his registration from Democrat to Republican, and he came down that golden escalator at Trump Tower back in 2015, until then, everybody in the culture and the media loved Donald Trump. He was a beloved, not everybody, but he was a beloved and
Yeah.
respected figure in business and on television. He had the number one rated show on NBC with The Apprentice, especially his
Yeah.
seasons of The Celebrity Apprentice, and he was fine. Once he changed to Republican and started criticizing Barack Obama, suddenly the whole country and this whole country turned on him, or at least half this country turned on him, and and I guess a lot of, as you said, a lot of my Canadian friends have a visceral negative reaction to even seeing the bad orange man on television. I would just say to that you Canadians are too kind to a fault. That we Americans, especially we Americans on the right, are a little tougher and maybe not quite as polite all the time. Although I always am with you, David.
But Jim, you're blind. He is a convicted criminal. Come on,
Uh,
let's be honest here, Jim, isn't he?
those those were trumped up charges of BS that would never been brought on anybody else. The whole idea that he's a convicted felon, that's actually not true technically, even right now. That still has to finish being adjudicated. But what Donald Trump is he's the expression of the American id. He is all aggression. He is, and so, but that's just kind of his style. Again, everything is a negotiation. He realizes that being Mr. Nice Guy all the time is not going to get him and his country what it and we want. He has to be tough, as he always says. He has to be brash. But what people kind of forget, when he does get his way, when the policies that he is pursuing are
Mhm.
actually brought to fruition, uh, there are rewards for that. And I know that. Look, did any of you guys see his interaction with French President Macron this week? You would have thought if any leader would be, making faces and barely able to stand his presence in the Oval Office, it would be Macron. But they were
Mhm.
yucking it up. They were shaking hands. Trump
Yeah,
took a
they
few
were.
questions from people that even made Macron smile. I think the world is going to learn to love Trump 2.0, because I think
Mm.
they're actually finally going to give him a fair chance, because I don't think many world leaders considered him a legitimate American president. They considered him a bit of a joke. And when
Mhm.
one of the first things he did was go over to Europe and say, "Yeah, you guys got to start paying your fair share around here. Why should we continue to be the number one and almost completely alone in the guarantor of the safety and protection of the all of Western Europe when you guys are not spending any money on this?" It was not something any
Exactly.
American president has ever
Yeah.
said to somebody, and he's frankly said that to Canada as well. And I know that this is now something you guys are thinking about your own security in ways that you wouldn't have if Kamala Harris was president. And frankly,
Mhm.
heart to heart, David, American to Canadian, I think it's good for you guys to be thinking a little bit more seriously about
What?
protecting yourself with your own money.
Yeah, I guess we need to grow up then. Yeah, so we need to actually rebuild our military. Good point, Jim. But yeah, to the point of your president, maybe we've bought into this visceral, emotional, almost like a kind of a slander. And it depends on the details. You've got to get into the details here. But yeah, there were a lot of made up narrative by his political opponents, and the people who carry the water, well, guess what? They're the usual suspects. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the AP, the Associated Press, that we all get in our legacy media. I mean, that's the stuff that we've read for years about Donald Trump. It's almost bizarre. It's put us in kind of an information bubble, if you know what I mean, Jim.
Yeah, you're in an information bubble, and that bubble is in the bottom of a chasm, and it's dark, and you really can't see anything, let alone the truth from way down there. And you certainly can't hear it in your bubble. The the Washington Post and the New York Times won Pulitzers for reporting on the Russia collusion between Donald
Oh
Trump
yeah,
and Vladimir Putin and the Russians
yeah.
to steal the 2016 election. Rachel, and they won Pulitzers for that. It was
Isn't
all
that
a
amazing?
fabrication, all a lie. None of it was true, and they have not given back their Pulitzers. Rachel Maddow is the highest paid person at MSNBC, a failing, crumbling network, and she went on the air every day for 4 years saying that Donald Trump is an agent of the Kremlin sitting in the White House. And as you mentioned before there, David, people have called Donald Trump a Nazi and a fascist. And
Yeah.
our former president, who people are extremely incurious about what he's up to these days, Joe Biden, called Donald Trump an existential threat to our democracy. And then, when you keep pushing that message, then yes,
Mhm.
people will start to believe it. And then eventually some people will grab a rifle and try to kill him, which is what happened in last summer in Butler, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
So there are consequences to this. The consequences that the lying mainstream media, that most everybody is at least passively exposed to. And if they don't get their news from other places, like shows like this one, they will be brainwashed into thinking
Mhm.
things that are
Mhm.
absolutely not true about Donald Trump, about the United States of America, and uh, that those things have consequences, and they're dangerous consequences. The biggest danger to our freedom here in the United States is not Donald Trump; it's the legacy media, which lies to people every single day about what is going on.
Mhm.
I used to be a member of what they call the White House press corps. So you're a
Yeah.
reporter at an outlet. My outlet was the Washington Times, that go to the White House and cover the
Mhm.
president and the administration every single day, go on trips. You get to be in what they call the pool. So once every 5 trips or so, I would get to fly on Air Force One, which was really great and a lot of fun. But the idea that the Associated Press has now been kicked out of that because they won't call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. It's actually a little bit more than that. Again, this is Donald Trump. Everything is negotiation. Everything is trying to send a message, and he's sending a message that the lying legacy media is on the way out, and that alternative, trusted, there are alternative media out there that are more trusted by the American people, and they're going to start getting their chance to be at the top of the journalism game by covering the White House as well.
Okay. Wow. So that's kind of a wake up call. I would suspect for a lot of Canadians. So you would believe then, Jim, that a lot of Americans figured this out. They actually realized the lies that were going on here, and that's why they reelected Donald Trump. That's what happened. Is that right, Jim?
It is. I mean, the legacy media in the United States, and I think frankly in Canada, are either dead or dying. They're zombie media. They
Oh.
don't know they're
Mhm.
dead. They think they're alive, and they're wandering around, and they're growling and they're shuffling, and they're dead, but they think they're alive because they're still moving. Eventually they are going to
Mm.
fall over and rot. The Rebel News media with our friend Ezra up there. I that's the Canadian news outlet I trust the most up there, and it's increasingly being
Mm.
more trusted, I think, than the CBC by many free thinking, independent thinking, and smart Canadians. And in this country, yes, the legacy media has actually failed, because it wasn't just red states that got redder. Blue states in the United States got redder. Almost every
Every
single
one of them.
county. Yeah,
Every one.
if you looked, the blue states all got redder. I mean, they didn't turn red necessarily, but they got redder, or more
Mhm.
purple, I suppose. There was a great map there. The New York Times was actually useful for almost just this one thing during the election, and it was when they released a map, an interactive map that showed you red arrows or blue arrows going in each direction,
Mhm.
and county by county all across the United States, even in deep blue states like California. Los Angeles County went more to Trump this time than they did in 2020. New Jersey was actually almost a swing state proper here in the United States.
Mhm.
Almost
Yeah,
every
me
county
too.
in New Jersey was going more
Mhm.
toward Trump than last time. I mean, almost every single county in the United States was more supportive of Trump this time than last time. And that's why this
No,
is a
it's
mandate.
remarkable.
That's why the legacy media was calling him every name in the book: existential threat, fascist, Hitler, all
Mhm.
these things.
Mhm.
And the public here still voted for him because they could see through the lies. They understood
Okay,
who
so
Donald Trump was.
but in Canada, through our legacy media, we've not heard a whit of that. They all think it was somehow Donald Trump got in there, and by golly, he's an existential threat. That's how they see him, by and large. So we'll see how this story plays out. But I think what you're doing is you're challenging us to scratch beneath the surface and realize that you just can't take an emotional, visceral reaction here, but we've got to look at what really happened. And by golly, it's complicated. And so when we get to today in 2025, in the end of February here, it's fascinating that Rasmussen and the Harvard Harris poll reveals that Donald Trump is high in the poll. What are you seeing, Jim?
Yeah, I see it. This is almost like a dream. This is almost unbelievable. The idea that Donald Trump would be, I think yesterday's poll, 53% approval rating, despite the mainstream media in this country hammering him as they did all through his first administration, and it's not having an effect. This is the proof. And I hope Canadians can see this, that 77 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump are not all brown shirts, that we haven't lost our vision of what America is supposed to be. We ratified what America is supposed to be by voting for Donald Trump and against Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris being a continuation of the left communist Marxist revolution in this country since the 1960s, and Donald Trump being the candidate of the counterrevolution that is trying to restore American norms that we grew up with and know are necessary to make America great again. I don't mean to sound like a commercial for Donald Trump in that way, but that's the mindset of the voters in the United States that supported
Exactly.
Donald Trump. And so, to see his approval rating at 53%, I don't think it was ever at 53% in his first term. And then when they asked the questions about all the things that he's doing, on immigration, on the economy, on D.O.G.E, on government waste, he is winning on every single issue down the road, down the line. The Democrats are actually at their lowest approval rating in the history of that poll. If I'm a Democrat in the United States right now, I would be pretty despondent. But what I see the Democrats doing is nothing different. They and the media think they can run the same playbook against Donald Trump this time that they did in the first time. And it is absolutely not working with the American people. They have lost all of their credibility. Again, our media in this country is a zombie media. They're walking around, they're shuffling, they're groaning, but they are not actually alive. They are dead, and they're going to just wither away, I think, over the next 4 years. I don't think MSNBC will be a going concern by the end of Trump's term.
Okay, so that's an interesting prediction, because at MSNBC, you've seen a whole series of hundreds of people laid off. I think CNN is down in the tank in terms of viewership. It's quite tiny. You've got Joanne Reed, some joke that it's joyless Anne Reed, among many others that have totally lost their positions. So what's going on there? Help us understand what's happening when Jim Acosta from CNN is out of a job. What's going on?
Well, all of these former media stars are going to spend a little bit more time with their podcasts and their Substacks, I suppose, and perhaps their families as well. What is happening is whenever these things happen, I think of that famous quote by Margaret Thatcher about, the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. And the problem with socialism and a lying media is that eventually you run out of viewers. I saw something again just today that more Democrats in the United States watch Fox News than watch either CNN or MSNBC. Even your core audience.
Kidding.
Nope. And that's actually long been true. The whole idea that Fox News is, triples the viewership of CNN and MSNBC on a lot of nights, that's only because of only Republicans watch Fox News. The dirty little secret, and all these networks actually know this because they know their audiences. They know that they've lost a lot of their audience to Fox News over the years. You can't triple the ratings of MSNBC with only Republicans. But the truth of the matter is they've lost all of their credibility. CNN, MSNBC is running out of money. NBC Comcast, which owns NBC News and CNBC and MSNBC, is trying to spin off MSNBC and CNBC, they're two cable networks, and
Hmm.
find a buyer for them. And so they're trying to, as if like you're selling your house, you'll try to put a coat of paint on it, maybe,
Hmm.
renovate the bathroom. Certainly you're going to vacuum the living room when people are going to come through and see. That's what Comcast is doing right now with MSNBC. They're trying to clean it up to find someone to buy their cable property, that and CNBC combined. But they'll keep NBC News separate, I guess. That's still the prestige
Hmm.
network. But they're doing
Fascinating.
that because Joy Reid was fired because she was a racist on the air continually.
Hmm.
She was the most racist host on any major network, maybe in the history of the world. And, she got fired because her ratings were lower than many, many people who just do it from their living room on YouTube. And so she got fired for that. Rachel Maddow, she's paid $25 million a year to basically work 1 day a week. MSNBC's business plan, their business strategy isn't working because even their own audience is fed up with it, because frankly, their own hard left audience has also been lied to. When you're a liar, when you're a
Yeah.
news outlet and you're telling lies, you're not just telling lies to some people, you're telling lies to all the people. Now, while people on the right never believed that Trump was a Nazi, Trump was an existential threat,
Hmm.
all that
Hmm.
kind of nonsense, their own audience did believe it. And their own audience thought that there's no way that Trump could win because he's a Nazi
Wow.
and he's a fascist. And then he
Yeah.
ended up winning. And so I think the problem here is that a lot of the audience, the core audience of MSNBC, is now just fed up and disillusioned because they have to
Hmm.
believe one of two things. Either most of the people that they work with and see at church and at their
Hmm.
kids' soccer game or on the golf course, either all those people are Nazis or MSNBC was lying to me the whole time. And why am I going to
Exactly.
continue
Yeah.
to watch a network that lies to me the whole time? And I think a lot of the
Right.
core audience has concluded the latter. And so you
Yeah.
can't sustain a audience-based business when your audience is leaving you.
Well, and I think people get tired of the endless ad hominem attacks. I mean, it's the oldest trick in the books. You don't talk about the real issues in a thoughtful, respectful way. Instead, you just attack people personally. So, yeah, wow, what a revelation that you've just outlined there, Jim. And I think that what I am struck by is frankly an even bigger picture on what's going on as we talk about this rebuild of America, or you use the word restoration of America. And I just want to recap that because it's not only economic and financial, it's geopolitical, it's cultural, as you've alluded to. And I think what's fascinating is that on the security side, we see, we've talked about the border, the need to get on with NATO, get rid of the open borders. But it's also, I think, we underestimate as Canadians, and maybe you can help us understand this, is the very real financial realities of the United States right now, in the sense that you've got a massive deficit, which in Canada we do too, a massive debt. I think it's the last time I checked the numbers, it was something like $38 trillion. It's eye-watering. It's hard to understand those numbers. And meanwhile, you've got a defense budget in the United States of, I believe, 3.8% of the GDP. I mean, this is an extraordinary number, and it's unsustainable. So, to me, it says that the United States, the new administration is coming in and looking at the cupboards and saying, by golly, the cupboards are bare. We've got to really rejig our financial numbers. That's why they've got this Department of Government Efficiency effort, the so-called D.O.G.E effort, but it's also resetting the military, rebuilding it, but also they can't afford, the United States, no one can afford a 3.6% of your GDP going to the military and covering the defense obligations, which people should be frankly covering themselves, e.g. Canada. Canada should be doing its own defense. So is that a key factor in driving what we're seeing in this new administration?
Yeah, I think Trump actually wants to lead by example, and the example he's trying to set is he's able to accomplish now what he thought he might be able to do his first time around. The best thing that happened to Donald Trump, and frankly to the United States of America, was Joe Biden getting into the White House in 2020. That gave Donald
What?
Trump time. Yes,
You'd say that's a good thing.
it's a good thing in this respect that the Donald Trump we see now, the Donald Trump 2.0, would not exist if he had to just roll it back again 4 years after basically his entire first term was sabotaged, and his second term would have been sabotaged as well. So after 4 years outside the White House and outside of Washington, he spent that time planning to run again and also planning what to do when he won. And what he had planned, I would have never guessed in a million years that what he planned to do was this efficient and frankly, this ruthless. And ruthlessness is what we need to get this country back on track. The D.O.G.E process, he brings in Elon Musk. Elon Musk is the most successful and wealthiest man in the world. He loves his adopted country of the United States of America, and he is he's actually risking his life. He talks about how many death threats he gets. He talked about that today at the first cabinet meeting, public cabinet meeting that the president held today as we're recording this. And he's putting all of that aside to help save his country. And that would not have been possible if Donald Trump was back in the White House in 2021. The D.O.G.E process that Elon Musk, and only Elon Musk could do something like this, he has the technological expertise to use a, kind of ignored but legitimate government agency that was ironically installed by Barack Obama, rename it the Department of Government Efficiency, and then put all of these expert coders and experts in AI and stuff to work figuring out what the heck's going on in our own government. It is something that they call it the Leviathan. It is so large that it's impossible to comprehend, but you have to start somewhere. And so when he starts, sicking his, kids with weaponized autism, like this is just what they do, and they're very good at it, and they can dig in there and find government waste and all these programs and USAID, and that basically we've had a shadow government that is completely out of the control of anybody. There's no accountability for it. Congress approves billions and billions of dollars to go to the USAID department. And then there's absolutely no oversight for where that money goes. There's no accountability. Hey, USAID, you spent $300 million to help Haiti. Are there any reports? Is there anybody even asking for an accountability or accounting of what you actually did to help Haiti? No, nobody's looking at that stuff. And what you find out is that the federal government is, by and large, an enormous grift, that an entire shadow government has been set up to collect taxpayer money and funnel it around in a circle among Democrat politicians and Republicans too, I'm sure we will find, to these non-governmental organizations that have executives that are politically connected, that make tons of money annually, in an annual salary, $1 million, $750,000 for the wife. My son is also on the board. He gets $500,000, and round it goes. And nobody's looking to see if these agencies are even legitimate, whether they actually do what they're supposed to do, whether they're actually even necessary. And so that kind of graft has now been exposed and never would have been. And it's only this way because Donald Trump decided on my second time, if I get in there again, I'm going to run this like a business. And if I took over as CEO of a business, says Donald Trump, the first thing I would do is an audit. That's what everybody who takes over an organization does. They do an audit of everything that is happening so that they can determine, especially if it's a failing business, to determine what we need to do to survive. And that means cutting the fat and cutting out stuff we don't need to be doing anymore. That's what he's doing to the United States of America on a grand scale. I never thought it was possible, but here it is. It's happening. We're experiencing it.
Okay, so this is the other elephant in the room when it comes to our heart-to-heart conversation, Jim, is they're looking at the United States as kind of like a failed country, and they say, we've got to change course. We can't live with the status quo anymore. We've got to get our costs under control, and we are going to be ruthless, to use your word. Get out those, not just useless expenditures, but the corruption. Like you just said, it's a grift. Like they have uncovered hundreds of billions of dollars being put to organizations that are up to no good, or are really doing kind of the political bidding of who exactly, Jim?
Well, of frankly, of the global elite. I mean, I think Donald Trump yesterday or today or this week sometime canceled a huge grant to the World Economic Forum. Why is the United States giving money to the World Economic Forum? That's
Right.
already an
They were
elite group
giving
with
money
billionaires in
to
it.
Klaus Schwab. They were
Yep.
giving money to Klaus Schwab's group. Why?
We were giving money. Yeah, I don't know why yet. We'll look into it, but we shouldn't have been giving all this money to the WEF and all these other places. Look, it's a grift. I mean, on our own podcast, one of the two podcasts that the Heartland Institute does that stream live on Thursdays and Fridays at noon Central Time. Fridays is the Climate Realism Show, and we highlighted last week the fact that Stacey Abrams, the failed gubernatorial candidate for Georgia, who became a cause celeb of the left and the Democrats by losing and claiming that she won, so she was an election denier that the left and Democrats were okay with. She was the head of a green group, that was supposed to be helping advance green energy programs in underserved communities, right? Something like that. She was awarded $2 billion by the United States
$2 billion.
Environmental Protection Agency, $2 billion with a B, to ostensibly distribute how she saw fit. Stacey Abrams doesn't have any expertise in green energy. I don't even know if she has solar panels on her house or a heat pump or even an energy efficient thermostat, but she was given $2 billion of our money to distribute how she saw fit to, help establish climate justice and all this other kind of stuff. And that is only one example of grift. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, who is a stated public enemy of the Heartland Institute, he's mentioned us by name on the floor of the Senate to run us down and accuse us of, swimming in dark money, which is not true. But anyway, Sheldon Whitehouse votes for bills that spend millions and millions of dollars, and part of that money is sent to a group that his wife works for. This just came out this week. And so these are just two examples of, there must be literally tens of thousands of examples of this kind of grift going on. I think Elon Musk was kind of joking in the beginning when he said, I think we could probably balance the budget just by getting rid of this stuff. He joked about that, I think, on X a few weeks ago. As the days go on, I think he's actually right that there is so much waste, fraud, abuse, and grift, even in our entitlement systems like Social Security and Medicare, that, and the remarkable thing, Dave, I'm sorry to keep going on, but the remarkable thing is that my entire adult life, I was told this could not be done. You can't even find the waste, fraud, and abuse. It's completely pointless. And the truth of the matter is that we've just never tried. We are finally actually trying to do it and get it under control. And we just keep finding more and more and more waste, fraud, abuse, corruption, and theft. And I say, keep going. And God bless Elon Musk, and God keep him safe.
Well, it's really quite an astounding story. In fact, I know that many countries, including many observers in Canada, think, gosh, we need our own DOGE effort. As the size of the state has become so great, the average Canadian remits half their income to government, and it's become so large and complex, people have wondered what the heck is going on. And surely that's a healthy exercise. If you believe in providing good value to the taxpayer, you need to be constantly reviewing in a very incisive way where that money's going. That's a key principle to good public policy, is transparency, and secondly, accountability. So how can you argue with that? And yet there's a number of critics that are arguing with it, aren't they, Jim?
Well, there are critics that don't have any popularity or any credibility. And that the first line of defense on that is our corrupt legacy media in the United States. They keep putting out this is another example of where I said earlier that these tricks don't work on the American mind anymore from the legacy media. These Jedi mind tricks, I guess we're all like Jabba the Hutt. They don't work on us anymore. And we laugh at them, at the Jedi tricks. But they keep trotting out these so-called sob stories. 60 Minutes brought some people on who were, they were actually only temporary employees of the Justice Department, I believe, put in there actually to go after the January 6 people. And they were telling sob stories about, oh, I'm out of a job, I'm going to be laid off. And, that stuff used to work. It used to work. It doesn't work anymore. People are actually cheering this stuff in the United States, at least people I know. But it's the emotional blackmail of putting out these sob stories of people who have been laid off because of the D.O.G.E efforts. Look, people get laid off in the private sector every single day. I think Facebook or Meta laid off 2,000 people. Were any of those people interviewed in just the last month or so? Were any of them interviewed on 60 Minutes about, oh, I have a mortgage? This whole idea that once you get a government job, you're in there for life, like we're the Soviet Union and you're literally an apparatchik, is not the way the United States is supposed to work and operate. I'm sorry, but there are a lot of government workers who are wasting time, who are not actually doing anything helpful to the American people, and they need to go. I'm sorry. And then they were offered 8 months severance plus full benefits that they had earned in their that they had accrued as a government employee. The most generous benefits in the United States are for federal workers. They were offered a deal. Go. Elon Musk even said it.
Wow.
Go do something else with your life. We don't need you here anymore. And we'll give you 8 months pay plus your benefits. And the majority of people just turn their nose up at it because they have this feeling of entitlement to a lifetime job working for some federal agency somewhere. The gravy train's over. It's over. We're not doing this anymore.
The gravy train's over. So it's a remarkable story of waste, fraud, and frankly, abuse. So the USAID story will continue to unfold. It's remarkable that George Soros, the head of the so-called Open Society Foundation, and was receiving just a lot of money to fund all kinds of things around the world. You've got the BBC that was a recipient, among many other media around the world, to basically carry their certain message. You've got also all kinds of radical groups. I think we had Black Lives Matter receive significant funding. And also it was the epicenter, it looks like, Jim, the epicenter to run a censorship operation across the U.S. media and big tech. Did that surprise you?
No, it's hard to surprise me with no matter what you said, and what may happen. It would be really hard to surprise. It would be really hard to surprise me. Although I was surprised, this did surprise me, that USAID represented 8% of the BBC's budget in the United Kingdom.
What?
Why are the American people paying
BBC?
8% of the BBC's budget? That is insane. And we shouldn't be having to do that. And it's a waste of our money. And frankly, most of this stuff that's paying out is a waste of our money. And as you pointed out, David, we are a country that is $38 trillion in debt. We have a $3 trillion, I think, deficit each year, or at least $1 trillion deficit each year. It's absurd. It cannot continue. And, one of the excuses or pushbacks on this is that, look, this is small potatoes. This isn't real. You're not going to really get any real savings by cutting all of these, cutting out this waste, fraud, and abuse and getting rid of USAID. It's such a small percentage of the U.S. federal budget. To which I say, correct. That's true. It is not a huge sum, and it's actually it's remarkable that it's not a huge sum because these are actual in real life huge sums. But I get it in relative perspective of the federal budget, it's small. But you have to start somewhere. And it's like if your kitchen was a complete disaster, that you had just made a cake with your kids and there's icing smeared all over the place and there's dishes everywhere and there's flour on the floor and there's sugar on the counter. And then you also have a full sink of dishes. Is the first thing you do start by washing the dishes, or do you pull the refrigerator out from the wall and start cleaning back behind there because that's more difficult? Of course, you start with the kitchen sink. And what we're seeing right now is that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are starting this enormous and necessary cleanup job by doing the dishes in the kitchen sink because it's the easiest thing to do. And then they will move on to the next one. Elon Musk pledged to continue captaining his Doge project until July of 2026. He wanted to have it
Wow.
completed by our 250th birthday here in the United States. And look how much he's accomplished in 5 weeks. It's
Mega.
amazing. He may be done before the end of the year, and we would probably have to put a statue up for him in front of what used to be the USAID building.
Okay. Well, as you know, Elon Musk has both South African roots and also some Canadian connections as well, from Saskatchewan, no less.
Oh,
So
wow.
perhaps maybe we could get him to make a detour over here too and help up with a Doge effort here. But in the meantime, one of the other policy areas that's quite interesting that the new administration is all over is the whole strategic area of their energy initiative. And they're talking all about full energy dominance, full spectrum energy dominance,
Mhm.
because they realize that energy is foundational to a nation's prosperity, its affordability. And that is in total contrast, Jim, with the whole net zero climate alarmism policy movement that is very much rooted in Canada and elsewhere. But I mean, this is a 180-degree departure from the Biden administration. So do you think that that is a significant change in policy that will make a big difference for the United States?
It will make a huge difference for the United States. And one of the things that it will stop, and that's what we're seeing with the Doge process, the Department of Government Efficiency, and all the corruption and graft that we see, so much of it is tied up into this so-called green energy net zero revolution, that so many
Mm,
people are getting rich to actually not produce reliable energy and to keep people poor. You think about the continent of Africa. One of the
mhm.
reasons it is probably going to be a quote unquote developing continent for the next 100 years is that the former Western colonial powers are imposing a sort of soft, distant colonialism on Africa by not allowing
Yeah.
them to develop energy the way the developed world did from around the 1850s until all the way up to today. They won't let,
Mhm.
they will not, the International Monetary Fund will not loan money to projects that would build, say, a coal plant in sub-Saharan Africa. They won't fund anything but so-called green energy, which is not efficient, which can't be scaled up in
Wow.
any way that you can, let alone live in a residential area in comfort. But you certainly can't get any industry going with green energy. So that is going to be reversed. I think Donald Trump is going to lead the world in
Mm.
allowing the developing nations of Africa and Asia and South
Okay.
America to get on the clean fossil fuel train,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
modern coal, natural gas.
Mhm. Okay, so that's a very good insight, is that these policy changes will reverberate around the world,
Yep.
really. Because why would we condemn developing nations to poverty when we should enable good energy for everyone, including everyone around the world? And it's interesting, in Canada, we've had a federal government that has a policy, has pursued a war on Canadian oil and gas to shut down that incredible industry. And it strikes me as being absurd that now, as the Trump administration pursues this whole energy theme, would that not be a great opportunity for Canada and the United States to build and strengthen our relationship and get, frankly, all of Canadian oil and gas working to build our continent and around the world?
I 100% agree, and I know that Donald Trump thinks that way as well. I mean, what did he not suggest to the premier of Alberta within a week of his swearing in? Like, yeah, I know it's supposedly a dead project, but maybe we can get the Keystone XL thing going
Exactly.
again to bring the oil sands, the tar oil sands oil down from Alberta into the United States for refining. Maybe it was the Albertan premier who actually reached out and said that. I can't remember which way it went,
Mhm.
but certainly Donald Trump is open to that conversation. And look, Canada is an enormously resource-rich country, but as a relatively small population in relation to those resources. The United States has 330 million people.
Mm.
We probably equal you in resources, but again, we have much many more people here. So you could be a next net exporter of energy and oil and natural gas and still have enough of it flowing to make energy so cheap for Canadians that you start actually attracting international business opportunities, because it's so cheap, and you have a very well-educated population. There's so many things
Mhm.
going for Canada in that way, but your leftist governments just continually refuse to allow you to responsibly get that energy out of the ground so that you can enrich yourselves, as a society and as a country overall. Canada can be such a huge powerhouse
Mhm.
economically and militarily if it chose to be that. But the voters of Canada apparently choose decline and restraint rather than vigorousness and energy. And that's what the United States, the people of the United States, have chosen. And I hope we're going to see that, because all those um, you know, whale disturbing, bird chopping windmills on the offshore are not going to be approved anymore. Drilling is going to be opened up in Alaska, in the Gulf, off our continental shelf, everywhere.
Mhm.
Donald Trump
Wow.
means it when he wants the United States to be the world leader in energy production, and he expects to be able to do that in a very short amount of time, certainly before the end of his 4 years.
Okay, so this has been quite a conversation, Jim, as we've had this heart to heart and frankly understanding better, well, certainly in your case as an American, what's really going on in the United States to rebuild a country and to bring it, into a new age of peace and prosperity. And I don't mean that in a cheesy way. At the same time, this seems like an opportunity for Canada if we kind of get along with this as a partner to kind of move things forward. Like energy is one case in point. But I also see a threat for this country. And I'm just curious what your perspective is on that, Jim, because as I look at this, I know that in our country, the last 10 years, we've seen a capital outflow of some $1.3 trillion. I mean, money flows downhill just like water where it feels like it can do business. And almost every jurisdiction in this country is frankly anti-business. It's very hard to get things done. It's hard to cut through regulation. The taxes are high. It's interesting. I just noticed this week that Donald Trump has revealed a special gold card for almost like a special card that allows people, the entrepreneurial class, if you have a mere $5 million, to emigrate easily to the United States. It's almost like if we don't get our act together, Jim, it's like all the money's going to flow to Canada, including the entrepreneurial class, which we need to help build this country too. Gosh, it almost sounds like we're going to kind of um, dissolve before our eyes. Am I being too dramatic and histrionic about this, Jim?
Well, I think it's right for you to be concerned about that. As I alluded to earlier, the I consider this the restoration of America, in many ways, kind of regaining our stance economically, patriotically, and
Mhm.
socially from the 1980s. And you had a prime minister in the 1980s, Brian Mulroney, if I'm getting this correctly, who was. I
Mhm.
just remembered I had a vision in my head as you were speaking, David, of a smiling Mulroney and a smiling Reagan,
That's right.
basically hand in hand, allies in NATO, allies in the Cold War, as close as brothers. And it seemed that the United States and Canada were great partners then. It seemed to be happier, more prosperous times for Canada back then than has been lately. And I think if the United States can continue following through with what I believe is going to be a true restoration and a lasting one, economically, culturally, and militarily and international relations, all of that, being a real leader on the global stage, I would hope that our that Canada would come along for the ride. I mean, I don't mean to,
Mhm.
it's not as if you need us like that, but you know what I'm saying. We're the big brother in this conversation among family, and so we want to do this together. But I truly believe that Donald Trump has the best interests of Canada in mind, in that he wants to see the same sort of restoration of confidence, of economic confidence and success, of military confidence and success, and all of that to come along with the United States. This could be a global restoration of, the kind of values that we used to take for granted in both of our countries and around the world. And it would be great to see that. I think when you see Donald Trump and hear Donald Trump making fun of Justin Trudeau, I chuckle every time because I think he is a fool and somebody worthy of mockery. But Donald Trump has a strategy in that. I think he's trying to send the message that you may need to dump that government and especially that prime minister, and then maybe things can change and we can have a very different conversation in that regard. And I hope that comes true for you.
Well, I think, you're trying to look at this as an opportunity for both of us, your country and mine. And in that context, though, I think that we need to be very focused on the issues, the policies that will enable Canada to move forward and to become, frankly, we think Canada could be the most free, prosperous nation in the world. And in that context, though, it's interesting that we have various short-term political actors who don't see it that way. They see it as an opportunity to play politics and frankly run not against their domestic political opponents, but against Donald Trump for all the reasons that we've mentioned, right? And so this is where I think it behooves as Canadians to see through that cloud of nonsense and to be able to realize that, frankly, what's at stake is everything, including our country. And this is what we stand to lose, as Canada is a nation of decline, and we should be going and renewing ourselves and, frankly, rebuilding this country as much as you are trying to do it for your nation as well.
Yeah, I mean, it just even in the spirit of competition. I know I made a joke that the United States let Canada win that that championship game the other night in the rink on the ice. But the fact of the matter is, Canada is a great country. It is a proud country, and it is a country of winners and competitors. And I think that's something that I admire about Canada. And I know Donald Trump, as a man who is always talking about winning, he's a very competitive person. Every business deal, every negotiation is a competition that he wants to win. I think to see a renewed spirit of competition in which Canadians do say, we can actually be better than the United States. We can actually succeed. We can have a better economy than the United States. We can attract better people. I would love that. The United States would love that because it would raise all of our spirits to see that happening on the great North American continent. And we do have great affection for our northern friends, and we'd love to see as much prosperity and success in Canada as possible.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, Jim, our friend. Thank you for joining us and for your kind words about our country, and touche back to you, as the French would say. And we certainly love that we can be fine neighbors on this great continent that we share together, North America. And so let's work together as partners and see this as an opportunity to up our game, and let's lace up our skates and have that friendly competition. So may the best country win as we work together. So thank you very much, Jim, for joining us for this conversation today.
It was my pleasure. Thanks, David.
Thank you for watching Leaders on the Frontier. We're a nonpartisan think tank. We explore ideas, policy, and practical solutions that can make a difference in the lives of Canadians. We do not accept any government funding. We work for you. Thank you for supporting Frontier. Visit fcpp.org to give. While you're there, be sure to check out our latest articles and research. Without open discussion and debate, you're not thinking, nor are you free. Comment below. We'd love for you to join the conversation.